Okay.
I'm just gonna be like, oh, I'm Carlos Garcia Martinez, doing a project, and then goes back to you, and then you introduce yourself, background,
Okay.
like what you study, all that good stuff. How are they going? Okay, cool. All right. My name is Carlos Garcia Martinez. I'm here conducting an interview with my former geography teacher, or geology teacher, sorry.
Geography.
Geography? Okay.
Yeah, we can start over.
Okay. Hello, my name is Carlos Garcia Martinez. I'm here conducting an interview with my former geography teacher, Mr. Larson here. I'm briefly going to touch on the topic of coastal erosion and how climate change is affecting that, and I'm here conducting an interview with him. I'd like him to introduce himself. Yeah.
Morning, Carlos. Yeah, I'm Gary Larson, professor here at Saddleback College. Mostly did my grad research in atmospheric sciences, oceanic circulations, and so really have been kind of observing coastal erosion just as a part of the sciences that I study over the last, 15, 20 years.
Yeah. So you would know a lot about how climate change is affecting the coast.
Yeah, I think we all can kind of see how climate change, especially with rising sea levels, even though it doesn't sound like a lot, we're probably looking at about 10 inches of sea level rise over the last 100 years or so. But even though it's been over the last 100 years, really we're watching it accelerate due to climate change and warming ocean temperatures. And one thing that I think a lot of us don't take into consideration is that when the ocean warms up, it actually, because it's a liquid, well, as it warms up, it's going to increase in volume. So not only are we getting a sea level rise through just additional loss of ice caps and glaciers, but we're also getting the expansion of the oceans, which will accelerate the rate of sea level rise.
Gotcha, yeah. So how have you seen this affect us locally here in Orange County? Like, if you've gone down to the beach and seen it like in person, like what has that been like for you?
Yeah, fortunately, being able to grow up along in Orange County along our coastal beaches, just seeing firsthand coastal erosion over the last 2 decades or 3 decades has been really impressive at the rate that we're losing huge chunks of our beaches. And it is difficult, we can't just pinpoint one, we can't just say it's because of X.
Yeah. So there's multiple factors you think that go into coastal erosion?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's definitely, we can say that some factors might have more of an impact on coastal erosion, and some impacts are newer impacts, like if we talk about urban development.
Yeah.
As we create new urban spaces, that leads to a loss of sediment. If we're not replenishing the sediment, then obviously we're losing some of our coast.
Yeah. So before we touch on a couple other topics, I would just like to have a brief explanation. What is coastal erosion, and how is that affecting us here?
Right. So coastal erosion is the process of losing sediment along our coast. So for example, our beaches, if you just picture a nice sandy beach that's maybe 200 feet wide, protecting infrastructure behind the beach, right, from waves. Wave energy is dissipated by shallow water and having that sand barrier. The sand moves in a up and down coast process, right? So that sand isn't just sitting there. It's always going to be moving as long as there's waves and wave action on the beach. As the sand moves, it can be lost down into deep ocean canyons, and ultimately, this has always been happening, but the sand that's lost typically is usually going to be replenished by incoming sediment off of rivers, and then just through landslides and runoff off cliffs. It's always going to be replenishing the lost sediment. Now, if we're losing that buffer of sand, and we've seen it, and you pointed out in your paper that
Yeah.
the waves do then just encroach on any of the infrastructure in the basketball court that you so enjoyed, right?
Yeah,
And then,
yeah.
yeah, so then there's no buffer. The waves can get all the way to the infrastructure, undercut the parking lot, collapse the basketball court.
It's all gone.
Yeah, and that's gone.
Yeah.
And you know, there's so many homes down there that are watching
Exactly.
be impacted by the waves.
Yeah, in my paper I did write about that, about how, I'm not sure specifically right now the numbers, I think it was about like $4 billion worth of homes in Newport Beach alone, that's on the coast, and that's just taking into account one city. You know, there's multiple cities along the coast, so like a lot of homes that are in that market range. It's gonna be a huge loss for the United States if that were to go under. But I did want to ask, so you're saying that coastal erosion is a natural process that happens already, and due to us building infrastructure on the coast, it kind of disrupts the natural process of what's going on there.
Well, so the infrastructure on the coast is, that's less of a worry. I mean, we're worried about losing that infrastructure, like if you have a nice home or the basketball court or park, whatever. It's built on the coast, but it's really what's happening inland from the beach. Remember, because sediment comes from the watershed of that beach. Whatever, if we take Dana Point, for example, that sediment is coming from the Santa Ana Mountains and downstream of the Santa Ana Mountains. So any sort of river or stream is transporting sediment into the main San Juan Creek and Oso Creek, Tribuco Creek, which ultimately get to Dana Point or Doheny, the Pacific Ocean. So if we're losing the additional sediment through urban developments, you know, we're just losing any sort of development, urbanization inland.
So you're saying this is more of an issue with the way sediment is brought down farther out than it is on the coast? So it's like more of an issue inland, like where like Santa Ana is in that area, that's what's affecting the coast more than what is actually going on at the coast? Or? Again,
it's not just a one or the other. It's this urbanization is definitely part of the problem, in that, just think if we pave over dirt, that dirt can't be transported anymore, right? If we're in Mission Viejo and we have a nice 1 acre dirt lot, in natural processes, that dirt lot will be exposed to weathering, meaning and erosion. That dirt will ultimately make it down to the beach through many different processes. But if we pave over the top of that, it's locked, right? So now weathering and erosion doesn't affect that dirt anymore. It's stuck underneath that parking lot. So we've cut off a portion of the supply to the ocean, to the beach.
Gotcha. So it's more than one issue that's going on at the same time that's affecting it. You know, with climate change, the sea levels rising, with urbanization, there's no sediment going into the beaches to replenish it. So it's like basically like a domino effect of multiple things.
Yeah, there's multiple things happening at the same time that are leading to an increased amount of coastal erosion. And I think we're kind of seeing a lot of it right now is because, you know, it takes some time, some decades, to really see the effects of urbanization, right? It's not going to be, you can't just say that we built a new community and then the next day we're going to see a loss of sediment. It takes time, ultimately, to see that loss of sediment.
Yeah, and you researched this, obviously there's been other climate scientists before. This has been an issue that has been discussed in like the 1930s. So if in your research, have you seen any like local climate scientists like kind of like give warnings about this beforehand and then just get ignored? Or?
Yeah, through my research, I've definitely seen, especially with looking at urban planning, I'm always going to be going back there because really scientists have to be involved with urban planners in order for whatever is going to be built to be okay in the environment. For example, like we knew, scientists foresaw the urban planning, what urban planning would do to coastal runoff.
Yeah.
And they come up with mitigations, right? Scientists, they can foresee something.
So they've thought of solutions ahead of time to try
Right.
to lower the effects of this going on, but
Exactly.
has it worked? Do you think has it worked?
It does work. The scientists will propose, for example, beach nourishment.
Yeah.
And that's really what scientists are trying to convince urban planners that they really have to stay on track with beach nourishment. And that, every X amount of years, X amount of tons of sand have to be brought to the coast to allow for that, to buffer the beach naturally.
So beach nourishment, what is beach nourishment? Can you explain?
Yeah, the idea is that, like for example, we'll use the San Juan Creek, for example. In creating the concrete liner for the creek, erosion slowed down because now the water is flowing over concrete and not over dirt. So we're losing sediment to the beach. So the mitigation for creating that concrete channel was that the county Orange County would provide beach nourishment in that dump trucks full of sand measured in metric tons would be placed on the north end of Dana Point and allowed to naturally drift through the littoral process south.
Gotcha.
Meaning that pile of sand makes up for what sand was lost in its natural process.
And you're saying that this hasn't been kept up long enough for it to actually like work and like keep working?
Unfortunately, it's been at irregular intervals.
Yeah.
And it seems that the county will really only spend the money for beach nourishment when it's like almost at a last ditch effort, right? Instead
so
of
it's too late.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be the case in most things. Like when it's already like too late, that's when people start to panic. And
Right.
Like, oh, like give them as much money as they need.
Right.
Yeah. So with beach nourishment, there's also other things that I've seen that people have tried to do, like creating living coastlines. Do you think that's a good idea, or how do you feel about that?
I haven't looked too much into it. I'm not sure. And in keeping living coastlines, it's true. You're able to kind of lock that sediment in using vegetation's roots. It works great for hillsides just in urban areas.
Yeah.
It would work great along the coast as well.
Yeah.
I haven't seen too many studies on it, so I'm not sure.
So it's kind of a relatively new thing that people are trying, or that scientists are trying to get.
It's funny you say that because I can think of some places that I'm thinking Bolsa Chica and up in the Huntington area where vegetation was used to try and hold on to some wetlands sand, and it seemed to work.
Yeah.
Holding that habitat for these for wildlife.
Gotcha.
And that seemed to work. For the purpose of saving habitat, it looked like it worked.
Yeah. All right. So, let's see another question I have for you. So, obviously you're a big surf guy.
Mm-hmm.
You like going along the coast. How has that affected you personally? Like, how have you seen the beach now? That it's been like, you've been like going for years,
Sure.
And you've seen that it's been affecting you. How has it affected you personally? Like,
it's been interesting just watching the process. So it's to me, I'm fascinated by what Mother Nature can do and watch coastal erosion happen. It hasn't really impacted surfing too much. The only things that I've really noticed is that people that use the beach for recreation are losing the actual beach. So coming down and putting up an umbrella and a beach blanket is not possible.
Yeah.
Right? It's becoming harder and harder to do because you're just losing the beach.
Yeah.
The waves, though, are more or less the same.
Yeah. It's just the space between land and water is what's getting affected.
Yeah, between the water and then infrastructure or whatever.
Yeah.
That's being greatly affected.
Gotcha. And I do write about that in my paper. I wrote an example on how the lifeguards are going to have to move inland because of the least amount of space that there's there, and then there's less time in between, like, someone's drowning and they're all the way in the parking lots, and then they don't have as much, view of the area. And I think that the public safety is kind of at risk there. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I noticed that you wrote about the public safety aspect in your paper, and I do agree. Like, for example, I'm sure you're aware of Cotton's Beach, where the beach was eroded away, and now the waves are encroaching on the railroad tracks.
Oh yeah, I also wrote about that. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So that's a section of beach that's it's part of California state beaches, and you can just imagine at high tide, the water is all the way up against that riprap. Right. There's no more sand on the beach. The water goes straight up to those boulders on below the railroad tracks.
And I would imagine that would have a very negative effect on public transportation. I mean, that railroad goes along like the entire coastline.
Right.
Like a lot of people use it to get from point A to point B. I did write, I think specifically like 8 million people one year went back and forth using that track. And if that were to be gone, or if that were to get affected in any way, I mean, I've seen that there's that in San Clemente that they've had to shut it down completely to try to mitigate the impact of it. So that's something that I wrote about, and that I think is very interesting. I think that people need to pay more attention to what's going on. Do you think that by like educating people and like letting people know that this is happening, that this will become an issue, a far greater issue, or what?
Yeah, I always think. I mean, when thinking about problems, to myself, I believe that education is always the easiest way to kind of ease that problem.
Yeah. Because I didn't know about this before your class, and then once I did take your class, I was like, oh, it's very interesting. And then when I did have the opportunity to write about an issue, I chose this one because it impacted me so much. Because obviously I went down to the beach and I saw for myself, my court was gone. Like the court that I used to play basketball in the summer was gone. So you think that by like telling more people, like have you seen the impact? Like have you seen like your students go out and raise more awareness? Or
right? Yeah, definitely. I think, and especially because it's been easier to just see it. Yeah. Right. In the past, it's hard to understand the processes of coastal erosion because you typically very, very slow.
Yeah.
Like when I talk about it in class, it had accelerated to the point where we can just talk about an event, losing the basketball court.
Yeah, I for my whole life, if you would have told me that, like I wouldn't be like, oh, that's an issue. But since it had impacted me personally, with like part of Capitol Beach just completely like getting washed away,
And I think it's really important to, in having discussions like this, or just even in just with your friends or whatever, that it's important to really understand or explain that coastal erosion is a natural process.
Yeah.
It is being accelerated due to many different factors.
But all man-made factors.
Right.
Yeah. We can
just start to talk about what is accelerating this coastal erosion.
Yeah.
And then try and come up with solutions, right?
Yeah.
Instead of and I unfortunately get into discussions where the discussion just ends with, well, it's just a natural process and there's nothing we can do.
Gotcha. That seems to be the whole thing behind people that are okay with climate change. They're like, oh, well, the climate changes all the time.
Right.
Like, why would I care?
Right.
Yeah. But it, as you can see, it's been impacting us on the beach. Here, you can see it everywhere. I mean, it's been raining nonstop, and it's been it used to be not, often that it would rain here, and it's been raining nonstop for like the past like couple months, and it's just,
Yeah, things change, and it's again, it's really difficult to pinpoint what are the many causes of these changes.
Gotcha.
But it's doable as long as we could,
Yeah.
have the patience to and.
Speaking of, have you spoken to any local climate scientists? Like, have you spoken to anyone about this issue?
I speak with a member of the Surfrider Foundation regularly,
Yeah.
and
What is the Surfrider Foundation?
it's the global foundation that is created in chapters. Each chapter is looking at a specific region of the world,
Yeah.
and basically just ensuring that our coastlines or oceans are protected, that they're clean, accessible.
Yeah.
And that's basically what the Surfrider Foundation does.
And then you speak with someone from the Surfrider Foundation?
Yeah, someone that is, I'm not exactly sure. I know he has an important role at the Surfrider Foundation in communicating information. And so we talk often, and they look at beach erosion as a major issue.
Yeah.
And that would be a great, it's like, that's a great platform that we can use for educating people on what's actually happening.
Yeah. So if you think the public was, do you think the public is aware of this issue, or do you think that awareness for this issue is kind of low? I'm sure people that live on the coast know a lot about what is going on, but as far as, everyone else in the area, do you think that their awareness of this issue is low?
Right, I would definitely say that the understanding of this issue is, like how many people actually know about it, is those people that are really close to the problem, right? So people that use the beach and then people that live along the beach understand the problem.
Yeah.
Are at least able to observe it and know that we're losing our beaches. But outside of that, I don't think many people know, or even if they did know, I'm not sure exactly if they would really care.
Yeah.
Because it's an investment of time to try and understand these things. So.
Gotcha, yeah. This obviously it took me over the course of the entire semester and learning, the ins and outs of how geography works. So obviously with me, okay, I understand, somewhat, at least not as much as you, but I understand somewhat. So I know that how this is happening, and then when I go down to see it, then it kind of stays with me. I'm like, okay, so I learned about this issue. I go down and I see that it's gradually happening. So do you think if more people were to be shown, if more people were to be, educated and made aware of this problem, that it would help and that it would actually, get something done about it?
Absolutely, I think, and then that people feel, if someone feels like they understand the problem, they feel like they can help out in any way. For example, I was just thinking about, there's people, if you live by a dam, that dam is in place to control water, to control the flow of a river.
Yeah.
Sediment that's supposed to be at the beach collects behind those dams. And that sediment, if it just sits, it's stagnant, right? Sediment's supposed to be moving, but that sediment is stagnant and can have organic material and starts to smell. There's one, just the Prado Dam right over here in Corona.
Yeah, I've seen that, drove past it.
Yeah, and so all of that sediment really should be at the beach. And if that's 30 miles away from the coast.
Yeah.
If you live in that area, I'm not sure if it's an eyesore. I'm not sure if it's a nuisance having that sand just being built up behind that dam there.
Yeah.
But I think all of those people that drive on the 91 freeway, when they look over and see that and go, whoa, that should be at the beach because there's coastal erosion and that's the buffer, that's the protector, of, and sitting there, what can I do to help? Who do I vote for? How, that sort of thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. Do we have any more questions? Do you have anything you'd like to discuss?
Nothing more than, I really appreciate, you sharing that paper with me.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I just, thought of you when I thought of that, because I was like, oh, well, you told me, like you taught an entire, like, you gave a whole class lecture on how this is a problem. And I thought, well, if I was going to talk about anything, I would talk about this, because, we live like 10 minutes, 20 minutes away from the coast. And then when you go to the beach, you see like all this construction is being done, a bunch of sandbags everywhere, there's a bunch of giant rocks, boulders, and like, you're like, this isn't the beach that I, would go to all the time. Like,
right.
It just looks very, like,
unusable.
Yeah, it just looks like, why would I go there? Like, there's a bunch of rocks, there's a bunch of sandbags, like there's not a bunch of space between, there's no place to prop up and just relax, so it's like, since this has, personally been impacting me, then I was like, okay, I'm going to write about this, and this is what I want my topic to be about.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
And then you just share it, and it's just amazing to see that you're creating a website and trying to get the message out about coastal erosion.
Yeah.
That's great.
All right.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Carlos.
Thank you for having this interview with me.
Yeah,
and I appreciate,
of course.
You taking the time out of your day to get, set up this interview with me and, go talk with me. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.